All right, welcome to the first episode of the Two Hands tutorial by Populous Personas. Our first tutorial is going to be a PC build. You have to bear with me here. I knew nothing about PC builds 6 months ago. I've been buying up components. I have everything I need finally. And this is going to be the build list. All right, first, the case. As some of you who have watched the Manic Money podcast will know, my old laptop isn't quite cutting it when it comes to streaming, editing, video creation. So first step is the case. I'm not going to grab that gigantic case and bring it over here. I don't think it'll fit. But we have the Phanteks Enthoo Pro 2. Comes with all kinds of components, wires, everything you need, a whole installation manual, etc. It's good stuff. It's gigantic. If I want to, upgrade in the future, start mining Bitcoin, this thing will be able to hold everything I need. All right. Now, the most important thing, it's going to be your motherboard, I'd say. The motherboard that I decided to go with was the Republic of Gamers Strix Z790A Gaming Wi-Fi, made by Asus. This is going to be a majority Asus build. I'm partial myself to Asus and Samsung, so you'll see a lot of those components in the course of this. This beautiful motherboard has an LGA 1700 Intel socket. It'll take 4 sticks of RAM. It has the PCIe 5 connection, even though they don't make anything that will go in there yet. But fingers crossed. Oh. Next, it's going to be the CPU, the chip. And I know you AMD lovers and Intel haters are probably going to shudder at the sight of an Intel i9 14900K. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I don't care. This is a 14th gen Raptor Lake processor. After it's new enough that there's no oxidation issues, it's been sitting around long enough that the new driver updates should keep it from frying, like some of my unlucky peoples out there. And as if you've been following the Intel stock, you know that they're not doing well as a result. Still, they have the best CPUs. They're the most efficient. They can handle more processes at the same time. AMD, I know you guys are great. Still, our C drive is next. So here we have the Samsung 990 Pro. I decided to go refurbish because it was about half the price. This was in somebody's PS5 for several months. I guess they decided to go with something different, or maybe they pawned it off to support a drug habit. I don't care. As long as it's formatted by the Geek Squad like they said it is, nobody's going to steal my data. I don't care. And to go with my mostly white and red build here for RAM, and we got to fill up all 4 slots. So we have the Kingston Fury Beasts. DDR5, 6400 megabytes per second. These bad boys right here with their beautiful white custom heat sinks will be able to handle everything I throw at them, which probably won't be much in the grand scheme of things, streaming and making video, but, the best of the best. This is the ultimate PC build. Now, how am I going to keep this motherboard cool? Especially that Intel chip, because we know they're getting fried out there. I decided to go with the big bad NHD15. All my cooling's Noctua made. I did some research, and I figured, if Glocks are great and they're made in Austria, these are also designed in Austria. So this bad boy right here has 2 140 millimeter fans and 2 radiated heat sinks in order to keep my chip from getting too hot. So, and obviously you can see this thing is massive. So it's a good thing I got that gigantic case. And then of course, I'm going air cooled, as you could probably tell. I'm sorry, but I don't know anybody out there. You have a liquid cool machine. That's great. Good for you. Just not for me. The last thing I need is a bunch of liquid pouring into sensitive electronic components. And this is my first build, so we're just going straight air cooled. Big case, lots of volume, lots of fans, just hoping for the best. Hoping for the best. So for that cooling, we loaded up. We loaded up on Noctuas. We got a bunch. We got your 140 millimeters and your 120 millimeters. These bad boys are going to be rushing rushing air in like Arctic breezes here. I can't talk, but you get the picture. Lots of air cooling. All right, on to the next. Power. We need the power. So for power supply, I went with the best. Asus Republic of Gamers once again. 1600 watt, or I went with the Thor, not Republic of Gamers. Oh, it is a Republic of Gamers Thor. Never mind. Asus 1600 watt titanium power supply. This thing weighs about 20 pounds, and if I want to, I can mine Bitcoin. It's got something going on there with cybernetics. I don't know. This all seems really good. Like I said, I have no clue what I'm doing. Flying by the seat of my pants. Well, last but definitely not least, and like I said, the ultimate, we're getting the best here. Republic of Gamers, Asus, we're noticing a trend. Strix graphics card. Yes, this is the NVIDIA 4090. It is a thing of beauty. Just take it in. This isn't coming out of this packaging until it's time to install, which you will see here in just a few seconds. So, come on this journey with me, and let's see if we can't burn my house down. Welcome. All right. So, the most crucial and important part of your PC builds is definitely going to be installing your CPU into your motherboard. All right. This is huge. So old CPUs used to use a pin system. This is very much a flawed design. Very much a flawed design, because if you bent over these mass array of pins that you had, you could end up, ruining a CPU chip. So you bend some pins over, CPU chip is ruined, but now they use a land grid array, which I don't know what that means, but apparently it's better. So obviously I went with the Intel, which uses the LGA land grid array 1700 setup. So be very careful with your motherboard, as it's basically just a bunch of exposed pins and soldered pieces underneath there. It's pretty wild. But there's this fun little thing they give you here. As you can probably see, they give you this nice little anti-static mat. I chose to wear gloves because, let's face it, gloves is the way to go. There's all contaminants are kept off of whatever you're working with. Not to mention that it has a nice way of keeping the static electricity down. So they have you this nice grounding mat. They give you this piece of plastic. So that's the best thing to put it on. It's foam, all little pin type connections and solder things underneath aren't going to pop up, aren't going to bend over. It'll be a nice little foam mat for them to sink into. All right, how do I open this? I know that They have this nice little cover that keeps your, this land grid array safe. This thing here is what's going to keep your chip in place. All right. So I'm kind of just like reading through the instructions while I go through this. So you'll have to excuse me. So the first thing they give you is the AMD sockets. All right. So what's nice is, as you can probably see here, there's a nice little, these nice little indentations. Those are meant to grab those two fins there on the Intel socket and hold it into place nicely. I'll show you. The bottom of this land grid array, if you can see, it lines up nicely with the pins on the bottom of this. So you're going to have this little land grid array here, and it's going to line up perfectly with that. So you're going to see there's a large gap in the connections here at the bottom corner, and you're going to have a large gap here in this array here. So those are basically going to line up. So what they'll do on these chips, as you notice, this motherboard kind of has an orientation. All the writing is right side up from this way to this way. All the writing is right side up from this way. So basically, all you're going to do is pop it in so everything is oriented. It's very simple. It's going to have some force, this little retention pin, when you pull it. This retention clip. It's okay. You might have to put a little bit of oomph into it. And then this cover lifts up. This cover is going to be important when you're installing your chip. All right. Obviously, you're going to want to make sure that you get the right socket for your motherboard. I knew I needed an LGA 1700, which is what the new Intel chips are built in. That's what I got. And on this clip, on this retention situation here, there's going to be a little triangle in the corner. That is what is going to be aligned with the CPU that you get. So I know my little triangles in this corner here. Therefore, the little triangle on this Intel chip in the corner here is going to line up with it. And the funny thing is, it's almost like ASUS understands that you're going to want to put the writing on this chip right side up with all the writing on this motherboard. So that's exactly what we're going to do. All right, when you're taking your chip out of its case, only grab the sides. Only the sides. I use gloves because they're good for reducing static electricity. This mat that they give you in your motherboard bag is also going to ground the electricity. Now, a lot of people freak out about this, but there's not much to freak out about. If you make sure you align your chip in like you saw it, that was very much. You align your chip into the socket. I mean, they try to make this as easy for you as possible. So don't mess this up. And obviously, when you're working with electronics, anything plastic, any kind of tech, give it a little wiggle. Make sure, hey, everything's good. Just the gentlest of touches. All right? And then you put this little retention situation back down here. And then you put the clip back. You put this back down. All right? This is going to hold your... You see this little thing right here that holds the retention clip in? It's more force than you would think when you're pushing it down. Don't freak out. If it's aligned in the plastic shroud underneath, you're going to be okay. Boom, bada bing. It's that easy. A lot of people get really scared about installing a CPU. Really, really scared. There's no reason to be afraid. Follow the steps. Follow my rules. Oh, if you're hesitant, go online. There is so much resources, so many resources online. Because this is going to be the first step when you're building a PC. You're going to be installing this first. This is the brain. All right? There we go. That is step number 1. On to step number 2. All right. So now you have your motherboard, your CPU's installed successfully because you listened to me. The next step is going to be installing your RAM sticks. So typically with most motherboards, your step after the CPU is going to be installing your cooler. But because I have an absolutely massive cooler, I'm going to be safe and install my RAM sticks first. All right. Now this one is actually one of the easiest things to do. So you have these little clips here that you're going to be opening, and you'll know because they're going to have little grooves for grip on them. All right? Don't screw that up. Don't be heavy-handed with it. Be gentle with it. It'll work fine. Obviously, I would recommend not doing this in a room with a bunch of dog hair like I am, but I love these dogs, so I'm willing to sacrifice my build. There's going to be a little gap here in the middle. You're going to see pins all up and down these things, and there's going to be a gap. That's going to line up with a gap in the pins in the slots. I'd hold this up for you, but obviously, ain't nobody got time for that. So when you're installing your RAM, make sure you push it in nice and straight and flat. All right, that's the only way it's going to go in. It's nice and straight and flat. And then you think, oh, let me just close the tab. No, you don't close the tab. You push it down till it snaps into place. And once again, it's going to be a surprising amount of force. Some motherboards, the clip will close on its own. But this one, no. And you see, once you get it in there, you'll hear the little pop. And then you close the latch if it hasn't closed on its own. Okay? These things have some type of retention spring system. So when you push the RAM down far enough, it's going to just click into place. All right? So listen. All right? It takes a surprising amount of force. I'm not going to lie. I thought I was doing something wrong. This is my second take. Trust me, you'll be fine. This is literally one of the easiest things you can do. And remember that these RAM sticks are nowhere near as expensive as a CPU or anything else. Let's not forget, I've never done this before. I am literally using research that I found off the internet. And I've done a substantial amount of research in order to get to this point. But give them a nice little gentle push, each one. Make sure it's good. Now see, that looks beautiful. 4 sticks of DDR5 RAM. Make Kingston Fury Beasts a total of 128 megabytes, gigabytes. I don't know. 128. That's the number. Gigabytes. 128 gigabytes of RAM. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Look at it. Just look at it. All right. So now the next step is going to be a CPU cooler. All right. So you're now at the point where you have your CPU installed. You have your RAM installed. And now you have to install a CPU cooler. I know most people are thinking to themselves, CPU cooler. What? But yes, your CPU needs its own designated, dedicated cooling unit. It's crazy to think about, but that's like the most sensitive part of your computer. I just use the word like. That's cringeworthy. My dogs are hating this because I'm keeping them out of the room due to their fur. You go. Get out of here. I'm putting my gloves back on for this next part because I have to do a lot of manipulation of the motherboard. And anyone who has installed an aftermarket CPU cooler, you know, because let's face it, the Asus stuff does not come with a CPU cooler because basically Asus assumes that you're going to be competent enough to pick your own heavy duty, badass CPU cooler. And that's exactly what I did. I bought the Noctua CPU cooler that I went through when I broke down the products that I'm putting in this computer. So I would say this is probably the most harrowing part of our journey here. We're going to be moving this motherboard around, a lot of manipulation, and a lot of brackets, right? So Noctua will give you everything you need to make this happen. So this bracket here is actually going to be going on the back side, the underside of this motherboard. It's going to be coming with a bunch of spacers, color-coded screws. They even give you a little number 2 Phillips tool to use in this situation. So we're just going to go for it. So there's going to be screws that come with the spacers. This is all stuff that goes on the backside. All right. These nuts and these other larger spacers, they're all going on the front side. They put them in those bags like this, and they label them Intel parts. Intel parts. This is why I'm using Noctua. They know that I'm probably not going to read the instructions. And that's why right on the bracket it says, caution, this side must face the motherboard. Gotta love them for that. So what I'm going to attempt to do is basically set up these little spacers and these pins and just basically try to rest this motherboard down on this whole setup once I have it ready to go. So it doesn't really matter what way you put these as long as they're there. So we're going to be putting these like this. And these bad boys are going to be going all through this bracket. They lock in. So just kind of twist them till they lock in place. They make the bracket. They make the bracket and screws so everything will lock into place. I'm just gonna. They kind of try to make it idiot proof. But let's face it, people are dumb. So when it comes to PC building, you can make it as idiot proof as possible. But someone is still gonna mess it up. It says literally, caution, face this side towards the motherboard. You can hear me clicking this into place. Then I'm gonna put these bad boys over the screws. And you can hear they don't want to go on. You make them go on. Slide them right over the top while keeping pressure on this thing. I gotta tighten these gloves. I hate that. I can only imagine what EMTs go through with these gloves. They got a little bit of slack in the pinky, for instance. For me, it's an extra 30 seconds of work. For an EMT, I mean, that can make the difference between life and death. I can only imagine what that must be like. Oh, God, where's the last spacer? There it is. All right. So, at this point, because I'm in a humid environment, we are in September in New England. I really don't have to worry much about any kind of static electricity. So I'm going to literally pick up this motherboard and just set it down on these screws. Oh, would you look at that? The plastic spacers actually hang onto the screws. So you can go ahead and lift up your motherboard and actually take the time to push this bracket through the holes for the CPU mounter. That is beautiful. That is beautiful. Gotta give it to Noctua for that. Because we don't want to ruin any pins. But you see that. The Noctua setup, the little plastic spacers for the underside of the motherboard actually hang onto this thing. Keep the pins in place, the screws in place, so you can go ahead and take the time to align those bad boys. So now you're going to be getting a bunch of spacers here. The blue spacers are what you would use for Intel and the Noctua kits. Now, I like Noctua, and I like them even more now, because let's face it, when you're having adult beverages, you can easily mess this stuff up. So the blue spacers equal Intel. And then from there, you're going to be putting these clips on. And these clips are only going to fit one way. They're not going to go this way. Oh, crap. Oh, crap. Hold on. So, the desired final orientation of the cooler shouldn't matter all that much. So basically, it's going to be counterintuitive, right? So if you put the spacer bars on like this, your cooler is going to be perpendicular, which is how I want it, right? Actually, let me slide this closer. So if you put your spacer bars on the top and bottom of your chip, your cooler is going to end up like this, which is how I want it. I want it perpendicular to the memory sticks, so that way, no matter how many fans I add to this, it's going to be out of the way of the graphics card. All right. And I know a lot of you who know cars are looking at that right now and saying, hey, that looks a lot like a radiator. And it does. It is. It is a very, very complicated radiator. All kinds of stuff going on. And I know most people who are watching this Your main concern, because you probably read the instructions, because you're a smart person, is going to be, and as it should be, oh, let's pretend that didn't happen. Your main concern is going to be the thermal paste. And that makes sense. A lot of people are worried about the thermal paste. They don't want to put too much on. But with an LGA 1700 socket, which is what Intel is rocking with and has rocked with for the past 5 years, because your random plebe usually doesn't mess that up. It's actually really not that hard, and I'm going to show you. So, basically, tightening these, you don't want to go too much. This is a circuit board. So, I have a bed sheet down on a wooden coffee table. I have the plastic and I have the foam. Basically, what you want to do is you want to get it hand tightened. And you come in with this little tool and you're going to go to the point where it starts rotating on the table with steady pressure. See, it's rotating. And then from there, put a hand down on the plastic, because you don't want the plastic to turn, and give it about 5 to 6 little extra pushes. But you don't want to torque this thing down too much. 3, 4, 5, 6. This is just green fiberboard. I know it's black, but this is basically green circuit board, not fiberboard, circuit board. Sorry. The blue collar brain takes over sometimes. And that's all you need. Take your fingers with your gloves on, grab these brackets, try to give it a good wiggle. You're going to notice it's very much stationary. So from there, you're going to be putting a giant freaking cooler down. So there are torque screws present on this thing. They're not going anywhere. They're designed to stay on this radiator apparatus. You're going to lower this thing down on it after you apply the thermal paste. So Noctua is pretty amazing. Me not doing my research, I literally bought thermal paste, not realizing that Noctua supplies thermal paste with their kits. So, when it comes to these thermal paste kits, this opening is closed off, right? It's not closed off. This opening is not closed off. This thing is ready to go. This opening is not ready to go. You need to take a pin or something and honestly, when it comes to this thermal paste, I just took the tip off. I'm not gonna lie. So it's just easier to work it like that. You can take the tip and pop a pin through it or cut it if you want to, but I found that taking the tip off is probably the best thing. I mean, you're just gonna get a nice steady distribution. So when it comes to the LGA 1700 socket, you want to put a 3 to 4 millimeter dot in the middle, right? And take your time with it. 3 to 4 millimeter dot in the middle. And then you want to put 5 1 to 2 millimeter dots of thermal paste around the edges of this chip. 1 to 2 millimeters. 5 small dots. Okay, 3 to 4 millimeter diameter in the center, and then about a 2 millimeter near the corners. So there's going to be 5 dots total. Don't get overzealous with this. You don't want thermal paste poking out. You know, like that might even be too much. You don't want, when you install this radiator, you do not want thermal paste sticking out, getting on the freaking circuit board. That's not what you want. So you have your bracket on the back. You have your bracket on the back. You have your spacers in the front. This is not a piece of IKEA furniture. Read the instructions. Don't be a goon. Don't tighten up one side more than the other when you're doing this. Okay? Do not tighten up one side too much when you're doing this. Like, see, I might have done that. I might have tightened up one side too much. So I'll loosen one side. And then I'll tighten one side. These things are on springs, so you can move them a bit. Go slowly. Find those threads. Do not cross thread this thing. This is not your Volkswagen Jetta. You can't just cross thread a bolt and call it a day. You can't just ram it down with an impact and it's going to be good. You want to be very careful, very particular with this step in the process. This is a spring-loaded cooling system. Put your hand on the top of it. Give it some nice pressure. Get that bolt and nut lined up. All right. Like once you get both screws started, give a quarter turn, half a turn to each one. Try to keep it very nice and steady. If you're super particular, you can use a tiny little level. I'm obviously not going to do that now that I have them started. I am going to reference the instructions to make sure I'm doing this right. So it says max torque 0.6 NMs, whatever the hell that means. I think they give you a long screwdriver with a small 90-degree turn at the end for a reason. Most humans aren't going to be able to turn this thing too hard. All right? You want to tighten this thing down 2 to 3 turns at a time. 2, 3 turns at a time till it stops. And you'll know when it stops because it just stops. And there's literally no way you can over tighten it. It literally just stops. And that's it. Like if you're trying to over tighten this thing with its spacers and its springs and everything else, you are a Hulkamaniac. You are a goon. You have no business building a PC. Just buy one pre-built. I am sitting here right now making the pinnacle of consumer PC human evolutionary science here. All right. So this fan I took off before I started because the instructions told me to. It's very easy to see how it goes because basically you just got to make sure both fans go the same way. It brackets into the system, the power cord going down, and it brackets onto the fins. It can literally bracket either way. It can literally bracket either way. But I referenced how it went in and how it bracketed. Because you want to put both fans facing the same exact way. And the exact alignment is not going to be perfect. And it doesn't have to be. That's the secret to this. Because you're going to be sitting there and thinking, oh, this has to be perfect. It does not have to be. So it gets two fans. And for the second fan, you're literally just going to take the little metal brackets that are included in the kit and install them the same exact way the brackets are installed on the first fan. And you're going to put them the same exact way the brackets are installed on the first fan. That's literally it. Just look at how it is. Make the second one the exact same way how the first one is. And it doesn't have to be perfect because, like, obviously my okay. So this part's a little more involved than I thought. So you're gonna want to just make sure your fans are flowing the same way. So you're gonna want to make sure your fans are flowing the same way, your power cords are poking out the same way, and you're gonna want to make sure the height is about the same. So I'm actually using the memory to basically gauge this. And because my memory is my RAM is sticking out so high, we basically have to kind of flip them around. And remember, you want airflow all going the same way. So my power cords are going to be sticking out the top of my motherboard. My fans are going to be as low as I can possibly make them. They're both going to be going the same way. Oh, geez. Here we go. All right. I take that back. Power cords poking down towards the motherboard. Not to a logo on the front of the fan going away from the RAM. So this part is more common sense than anything. So you're going to want Noctua logos basically going the same way. And from there, you should be good. As long as you keep the Noctua logos going the same way, the clips should work as designed. It's going to seem very cheesy, very cheap for anybody who's not built a PC before. But I guess this is just how a CPU cooler works. With the heat sinks on the motherboard, I have to mount the second fan over the RAM, and therefore I have a height restriction. Therefore, I have a height restriction. And because of the secondary clips, because I basically bought the most badass CPU cooler there is, they kind of assume that you're going to know what you're doing. So, I bottomed out the CPU cooler. I've just now decided that I'm going to have the heights match. So, you get these CPU clips. You basically match one fan to the next fan, make them exactly the same. Make them so the power cables are coming out on the same side. Make it so the airflow is going to the same side because you don't want them working against each other. Make sure the logos on the fan face the same way. And now, boom, look at that. Look at that. You have a completed freaking motherboard. This is beautiful. Beautiful. I don't know how exactly these little cables are going to supply power to this thing. I don't know exactly how these cables are going to be hooking up. I do know for low noise, you basically want to use the splitter cable Noctua supplies, and you're going to be hooking both of these into it. And obviously, I'm all about low noise, so I'm going to be hooking both of these into it. Because let's face it, this CPU cooler that I have on my CPU is overkill. But I love it. I love it. It's a beautiful thing. You know? And then I just read that basically you don't want to do this. You want to use these low noise adapters first, hook those up, and then put the splitter cable on. If you're trying to go low noise, do not hook your splitter cables up directly. Oh, jeez. Did that really just come undone? That's embarrassing. I swear to God, this never happens. I swear to God, this never happens. So read your instructions. Read your instructions thoroughly. Read your instructions thoroughly. Make sure you're hooking up your Noctua power supplies correctly for your fans. For your CPU cooler, make sure you keep this little Noctua stick-on tab that they send you. You're going to want to put that on the outside of your PC to let everybody know you've chosen greatness. And yeah, right now you have a completed motherboard. Minus the M2 hard drive, C drive setup, minus the graphics card. But basically, this thing with the CPU cooler attached is ready to go in your computer. So from here on out, we're going to be having to readjust this camera because I'm having this entire gigantic computer case up here. But yeah. All right. Welcome to. No, welcome. All right. So now that we got the CPU cooler all set up, fans bracketed to radiators, power cords into the motherboard. There's two CPU power attachments, and basically this thing is set up with a splitter so you can go into one. This Asus motherboard, it comes with sorry, I'm over from last night. It has two different CPU fan power attachments, so I'm just going ahead and using both of them and hoping for the best because that's what we do here. Two hands tutorial. Now, if you can see in here, there is the plate that was on here that houses one of our M2s. So an M2 is like a integrated power setup. It's got a nice little rubbery thermal paste type thing. The only thing is, because we are using a one-sided M2 with the Samsung 990 EVO, we need to use the nice little rubber pads that come with this. Now, it's important to note that these little rubber pads have a stick and peel thing going on, and that is supposed to go here on the actual M2, not here on that little. All right, have fun. Yes. Make good decisions. All right, and then from there, it's very basic. This will slide into here. I am filming. So slide into here. You might not be able to see this, but when you slide it in, it's going to want to pitch up. And you slide it in, it's going to want to pitch up. So, let's see if that's supposed to. I don't know why it's doing that. Hmm. Hmm. So when you slide it in, it's going to want to pitch up, which is very strange. That's not good. And then this thing, this Asus motherboard has this little quick Q attachment feature, which is different. I've never seen nothing like that before. But this is very easy to attach. That's basically it. On the bracket itself, I apologize for there was another situation here. This sticky stuff. It's gonna go right on there. And so yeah, this thing's gonna be all stickied up. I question that, but what are you gonna do? Once you get that started, go ahead and tighten those screws down. Of course, make sure you got them in the right spots. You'll know because there is a indentation on one side of this for this screw. So I'll get that one started. Always follow the rule of never tighten one down more than all the way. Give one a little bit, one a little bit more. You're not gonna be able to tighten it down too much. Get it so it's nice and static, solid again. Boom, your M2's in place. So from here, we are going to be installing this bad boy into the case. So that's why there's more of a distance here, because the case is going to be going around this table. All right. All right. So brought the camera farther away. It's not great, but you'll be able to see everything that's going on with this thing. So this Phanteks case comes with these preset screws that are made for holding the glass temper panel in place. On the front here, there we go, an aspect ratio that you can. So on the front here, this cover, it just pops off. The front cover. And then this glass slides right out. The screws are a part of that, just built into the frame. Get that out the way. Now, this is where your motherboard is going to bracket to. It has standoff screws in here. It's already got standoffs. It's designed for multiple different types of motherboards. This particular case can handle This particular case can handle you can do a dual motherboard setup. It can handle 2 motherboards. You can have a regular motherboard in here and then a mini ATX. Now, there's a lot of stuff going on with this one. I read through the manual, figured out what's what. Oh, power supply goes in here. Now, I mean, I might have to modify this bad boy depending on what I'm doing, but that's why you read the manual. Well, the manual is going to go through every little thing here. It's going to tell you where air cooling goes, where storage goes, if you're going to be doing a dual system. It tells you how to remove the glass panel, removing the other panel, and what standoffs you're going to be using if you are installing dual motherboards. This is all very important stuff. Very, very important stuff. So make sure you read through all this stuff. And don't be like me and just basically throwing that bad boy in there. So it's kind of going for it. It's obviously going to be edited because let's face it, it's probably the best thing to do. Just make sure I edit this because this part's going to take a while. I'm going to be reading through manuals as I'm doing this. You gotta make sure you peel all the plastic off everything too. Put all this plastic shit all over. This plastic stuff. So you have to be very careful when you do this. I would say because of the way that the CPU cooler setup is attached, the best thing to do when you're getting to this part is to lift by the CPU cooler itself. It's just gonna go a lot better. You got to be very careful when you're doing this. Make sure you line them up right. Because as you can probably see, you only have a small, tiny little circle where every screw is supposed to go. You got to be careful with it. Whew. When you do it, all the USBs will line up. Oh, yes. I bought a hardware kit because Mama didn't raise no fool. And everything is pretty standard when it comes to this stuff. So, no, those aren't gonna work. Maybe these ones will work. Mm-hmm. So I do know that these little things here are literally designed for this. So it's probably easier to put them on first. And now, when it comes to this part, you want to use the M3 by 5 screws. This one already has. You take the M3 by 5 screw here. You put the little collar on it. Let's face it, there's no way you're putting those collars on the other side of this motherboard. And you don't technically need them. You don't technically need them, but I like to use them when it comes to this part. And when I say I like to use them, I mean, this is my first time doing this, and it just seems to make sense. You are going to drop stuff. That is okay. Especially when you're putting the screws down through the heat sinks. Yes, just like that. And you're putting the screws down through the heat sinks. You're gonna drop some stuff. And that will necessitate you taking additional parts out just to get at it. Huh. This one might not be getting a little red thing because the screw is basically where it needed to go already. So I'm just gonna get the little red thing out of here. We're gonna raw dog this screw here. Yeah, I know. Just like that, I'm gonna remove this heatsink. All right. Have to remove that heatsink to get this screw and collar into place. Oh boy. This is tedious. It's very, very tedious. Jesus. All right. We got to figure something out here. So I'm going to put a little bit of thermal paste onto the tip of the screwdriver, hoping that there's some type of stickiness here. It's going to hold this screw on there. Oh. And that is the trick. Put a little bit of thermal paste under the end of the screwdriver, and it holds the screw onto the screwdriver enough for you to tighten it in there nice. Now that thermal paste is just going to dry on there. It'll be fine. But now it is all over my fingertips. So you're going to have to clean off the tip of the screwdriver between screws. And you're just going to have to make sure you don't get thermal paste all over the place. Make sure the screws are nice and tight. You don't want to go so tight that you break the circuit board that it's made out of, but you also don't you also don't want it coming loose. For any of my heavy-handed gorilla type people, you're going to have to ignore your instinct to beast things out with this. There's going to be 9 holes in this circuit board, and this case is designed to effectively utilize all of them. Now, it would appear that the top is probably going to be the worst. I can't figure out how this top comes off on this. Well, don't mind that. There's nothing important. Can't figure out how the top comes off on this. So I think I'm just going to be trying to wing it through on these other areas. It looks like it is. Where's the light? It looks like it is. Hold on, the light. Oh, there we go. Those look like pop rivets that are holding the top in place. So it does appear that we are going to have a heck of a time with these last couple. So the trick here is going to be putting a little bit of thermal paste on the ring. So it stays together. Clean off the excess once you squeeze it and some comes off. And putting a little bit of thermal paste on the top of the screw. So the screwdriver hold on to the screw. And then at that point, we're going to have to carefully thread our way between the top of the case down into the hole that the screw fastens into. This is like operation. And let's see, we do have a longer screwdriver. You have a longer screwdriver that we can use to really torque that screw down. Oh, would you look at that? Both light bulbs are working now. What a miracle. Now, got one more left here. Same thing, a little bit of thermal paste on the ring. A little bit of thermal paste on the head of the machine screw. slowly, carefully descend, and boom. We are now free to move about the cabin. All right. Oh, I got thermal paste all over my fingertips now. It's not ideal, but what you gonna do? Oh, I can put this back in place. All right, now our motherboard is installed in the PC. Now, I decided to do it this way. It might cause problems, but I decided to do it this way on purpose. Mostly because this is the step that most people will install this into their PC. You want to get certain things on there. CPU cooler, you definitely want to get the chip in. I mean, technically, you could install the motherboard first. It's easier to lower this thing in by the CPU cooler. There's a bracket that attaches it to the back of the motherboard, and that really gives you a nice place to hold it and lower it in there safely. Now we're going to be going with the power supply and the fans. Actually, the fans are probably going to be more important than anything. There's a lot of them. There's going to be a lot of cables going everywhere. And when it comes to the fans, nobody can tell you exactly how your fan setup should be. So me, knowing the setup of my case and where certain fans are going to mount, and the fact that we have a dog fur issue here, dogs, gotta love them, but they're a problem. And based off of our airflow situation, I'm At this point, probably won't put any fans in the bottom of the case. And if I do put fans in the bottom of the case, they're going to be blowing out. This is going to be an intake fan right here. Mostly because these fans are blowing this way. So I want an intake pulling from the back, blowing that way. Now, for that, so for that is going to be the first 140 millimeter fan. It's going to be pulling from the back. And blowing air right onto that unit. Like so. Like so. Or like so. All right. Like so. Noctua has these crazy little rubber connectors. They're pretty wild. Part of me wants to use them just because they look like they'd work. They look pretty cool. But then again, um, this is such a weird fastener. It's this rubber mounted thing. And somehow it actually fastens it to there really freaking good. That is wild. I can't imagine. I don't understand how this is a thing, but damn, do they work. Oh. So you gotta get it so it sits flush down at the bottom of the case, and then I literally just pull the rubber end till it cinches tight with the fan. cinches the fan tight to the case. Now, it is astonishing how well these little rubber things are holding this in place. Absolutely astonishing. Now, my big fat fingers can't reach down there to pull. And these ones over here, corner, which makes me think I probably should have installed the fans before the CPU. But, have no fear, I will have to go get some needle nose pliers and figure this out. Alrighty, so you'll notice some things change right there. Clippy, clippy. Now we have a bunch of fans in the case. Now, I could have time-lapsed that. I could have, but it probably would have just been embarrassing for me. Excuse me. Basically, there was a learning curve there when it took to getting these fans installed. So these Noctua fans, I did not realize, but they have a special clip system here. These little rubber doinglies, and to fasten them to your case. So I was using those here in this fan, but obviously with the fan cooler and everything really close, it was very difficult to try to pull this thing through to get it fastened, because it pulls through and through the corner of a fan. You pull that bad boy through to fasten it to the side of your case. Now, when you do that, it's super tight. It's pretty wild how it works. But in here, I couldn't really get the space to pull it. So I used, I don't know where they are, but those pliers that people use for fishing, I had to use those to get down in there and pull it. And then I found out after the fact that Noctua actually gives you these nice little screws to screw into the fan if you can't get the rubber or you don't want to use the rubber fastening system. So I feel pretty stupid right now, but I'll show you here. Boom, you pull till it's nice and tight on the case. Wham bam. And then you just cut off the excess on these 120 millimeter fans. And for the 140s, it's a very small rubber fastener. that you just pull through. So you don't even need to trim any excess off. So I'm just gonna go with the rubbers fasteners because they seem to work really well and it's not as rigid. So I just installed this fan backwards. Okay. So this fan, obviously, it needs to be installed like this. Hopefully that's not going to affect how strongly these hold on after pulling them back out. But pretty sure that I'm now going to have to use 2 screws after ruining those too. So with the fans, it's really important. So I have this one's pulling in. There's 3 120s also pulling in here. These on the CPU cooler are working in tandem with this to pull all the air through there. And it's really important that your intake fan CFM exceeds your exhaust fans because you need to create positive pressure in the case. You need to have positive pressure. So I don't think having fans on the bottom of the case is going to do all that much. So I left the bottom of the case bare of any fans for the time being. I had a bunch of these fans, so like the biggest thing with the bottom of the case is going to be where the power supply goes. But that has its own fan. So it's also in a metal case separate from the rest of the unit. So it's probably not going to be as big of a deal. All right. All right. I did not realize that I had 2 of these 140 millimeter fans here. So I'm probably going to have to, I'm definitely going to have to do something different here. Because I really don't want to have 2 140s pulling out. I think it would actually be better to have this 140 on the top as well. So we're gonna go ahead and slap this 120 over here. Slap it. Oh, why did I just put those fasteners? Slap it. Let's get this going the same way though. So I put another 120 here, and I'm gonna put another 140 on the top of the case there. That's what I thought I was doing anyway, so that's what we're gonna rock with here. And the reason I decided to go with the rubber fasteners too, this rubber fastener system, is that I figure I can always
You can always swap them out for the screws after the fact. And so, and then I'll put this one here. And I'll put this one here. And I think stuff falling everywhere. This one I think I'm just going to use the screws. But I mean, I can show you guys. So for these ones, what I found is best is to get it to it seated well here in the case. It's got a little ridge that's made to bottom out on the slot for your fans. And then what you do is it's made to bottom out in the slot for the fans. And then you just get the fan up there and you pull it through until it's tight. So I'm basically doing that just to kind of keep it in place while I put screws in the other three corners. But yeah, these rubber fit connectors are weird, but they seem to work well. The screws are a coarse thread, and they really bite into the plastic, which tells me that they really bite into the plastic, which tells me that, I mean, these are going to be a one-time. But yeah, there's no threaded system here. They're just biting into plastic. These coarse threaded screws. They're just biting into the plastic. Oh, geez. So I have 4 intake fans, 2 more fans on the CPU cooler radiator. You gotta keep that bad boy cool. And then I have 3 exhaust fans. And these are of varying sizes. When I ordered them, I didn't really take the time to actually make a plan for these fans, but that's not important. So I have to use splitters. There's a bunch of 4-pin connections for fans in this case. With the amount of fans that I'm using, there's just not enough connections. Plus, this allows me to leave one of these connections open for more fans in the future, just in case this doesn't end up being enough. So I have to use extenders as well, because these all tie into the motherboard. These, be careful with these. They're just a little 4-pin connector. And see, the motherboard has all these fan connections on it. There's no mistaking them for anything else. You'll know when it's seated. It doesn't exactly click into place. You definitely don't want to be bending these. And I will have to do some cable management after the fact here. Now, cable management is important, but for some of you who have done some electrical work, you're gonna have to realize that it's not as sturdy or strong as you would expect. You're using zip ties for the cable management. So for instance, these are blowing out. So I'm definitely gonna want to keep them over here. So for cable management here, I would probably tie these into place together, zip tie these in place together, and keep them out of the way. And I might even bring these ones up here, keep them above and out of the way of the fan. So I'll find a place to zip tie them up here. It's basically going to be all about keeping the connectors away from the fan, or keeping the wires away from the fans that are exhausting. Try not to let them get sucked in anywhere. With also leaving myself the ability to fit hard drives in here if need be, and other different components. Because the graphics card is going to be in here. So they're going to be going around the graphics card as well. And that's the point where we've reached the last but not least, we've reached the graphics card installation. So I have to grab my anti-sag bracket for that. Should be included in here somewhere. Oh, I just found all the fasteners that they send you for this. Well, so much for that. Yeah. Fantex sends you a bunch of fasteners. Huh. Whatever. All right. Oh. All right. So this right here is going to be the anti-sag bracket for our GPU. And I mean, we're going to be using that because, let's face it, this GPU is going to create some sag. I believe it gets installed here somewhere. But it's hard to be sure.
Alrighty. Then again, I also have an anti-aftermarket GPU anti-sag bracket. So we might end up having to use that. Oh, this is a thing of beauty right here. NVIDIA, Republic of Gamers, Asus GPU bracket. So it's gonna have a bunch of little things in the different HDMI ports. Just get rid of those. It's gonna have plastic on it. Just peel all of that off. No, you gotta peel it off. These little tiny fan centers. And you gotta find a spot to get the plastic off here. Oh yeah, there we go. Oh, Atlanta. Oh, it is everywhere. Oh, don't let your plastic fall down the computer somewhere. Oh man. This is obscene. Absolutely obscene. Alrighty. So
Sorry, one of my lapel mics died. The battery doth perished. So, swap out for a different one. Now I tighten these down real good. So, a big problem that these enormous GPUs have is that they sag. No, I would never, ever, ever, ever install one of these without an anti-sag bracket. That would just be dumb. So I have a couple different possibilities here when it comes to that that I might employ. There's the anti-sag bracket that comes with the case. Here, I'm assuming this bad boy is going to fasten down over here somehow. I'm not too sure, but I also got a aftermarket anti-sag bracket which basically just works by securing to anywhere below the case that it can fit. And which in this instance would be back here. So you would you'd stick it down and then come up here and tighten it. That's one way to do it. It's an aftermarket one. It's basically because you're secured here, you got that wiggle room. Not good. All right. Well, let me just trim these excess rubber doily things. Remember, make sure you don't leave those little rubber pieces. Don't leave any of this stuff fall into the case. Alrighty. So we're good. We have this is basically completed. So with your M2, you have 4 terabytes of storage on there. You don't necessarily need to do a drive. I'm definitely going to do some drives. I will probably end up putting at least one solid state drive in one of these. These are made for solid state drives specifically. That'll be a thing that happens eventually when I get one. But now we're going to get our power supply in there. Because as you all know, you need power. All right. No. So I put in a, let's check this out. I put in this stock factory GPU sag bracket. So you can see what it's designed to do is to basically hold the tabs of the GPU from moving at all. So I'm sure it'll do that just fine. But right now, and then I removed these things. I don't know what they are. There was 3 of them. There was 3 of these things, all screwed here, screwed there across this. I don't know what they're for. It makes no sense. So I got rid of them. I also put my aftermarket anti-sag bracket in, which was a little annoying. And I had to go through these little rubber grommet things that are made for power wires. So I had to go through these little rubber grommet thing here in order to tighten that anti-sag bracket back there. But for this is just the installation of the power supply. So there's another plate here. It comes off with literally just 2 thumb screws. Just 2 thumb screws. It's on a hinge, so it opens right up, giving you all these different power supplies that are built in here for the Phanteks case. So you want to get these separated out the way. I know there's lights in this case. I'm not sure what's what, but basically a lot of these connections are going to be, one's going to go to the power button up in the front of the unit. You know, basically the only power wires you're going to be running yourself, which are supplied in the Republic of Gamers 1600 watt titanium power supply that I have, the Thor 1600 watt, is you're going to be running cables out here through this grommet hole. Possibly. You could also run them up here, out this grommet hole, or out this one too. I think the best thing to do is the shortest distance between 2 points. So the motherboard power hookup is going to be very close to where this bottom rubber grommet hole is. So I probably run my motherboard hookup out here to that. And then when it comes to the GPU is sitting right in here. You see that? So I'll probably run the GPU power supply up behind this nice little cable, tie here and out and around to it above the fans that are on the bottom of the GPU. We don't want anything getting sucked up. The power supply unit. So this power supply is going to come with 4 screws. Now, I'm looking at this big thing. I'm thinking the best thing to do with this, after you peel all the plastic off, it's just like plastic on everything all the time. So we're going to be checking orientation. You want to constantly be checking orientation with this stuff. And you want to get it in there and see how it's sitting. So, you want to make sure that the screw holes line up and everything else. And they do. So, I'm assuming that the other side is obviously the bottom of the unit. It has the labels and such. And this side with the silvery, shiny stuff and the fan, which will remain unimpeded once this little door is closed. This fan will remain unimpeded. You have to use common sense with this. You don't necessarily, when it comes to something like this, need to look at the manual. You can look at this and go, huh, yeah, no. This should definitely be oriented like this, or else the fan will be choked out. And you definitely don't want to have that. So alright. So I'm just trying to see which screws I need to secure the power supply. Oh, they're there. Oh, so sorry. I'm using my different screw cases right now. Instead of an actual camera mount. It doth look like. Any, not these. These. So 4 of these. Now, I get these started. So when it comes to this sort of stuff, like all these little tiny screws that you have here, they're all basically going to be standard issue. And you'd be surprised how many of them are all number 2 Phillips, the most common. So as before, you want to, start tightening down each of the screws, but don't get any of them super tight. Obviously, this power supply is mostly just sitting down there in there with gravity, but these 4 screws are going to align it nicely, bring the metal till it's touching, therefore eliminating a spot where debris or other such stuff could get in. And then it's also going to be providing us a nice little spot here. That's almost like a secondary location with which to turn this off and on. Now, and of course, as you can see, we have this nice little handy dandy port there. Now, what's nice is everything is going to be labeled. So these are both labeled USB 3. This one's labeled USB 3.1. All these things are going to be labeled, and they're going to be special pinned connections that will only work in certain parts of the power supply. Now, basically, but you also have to be very careful with this. See, there's a SATA cable. We're probably not going to use because there's no current SATA in here. But inside of your power supply, there is this giant bag of wire. This thing is absolutely massive. And these aren't necessarily going to be labeled. They're just going to be a bunch of different pinned connections. The first wires that you're going to want to hook up, your motherboard. I mean, all these are going to be labeled PSU, whatever that means. PSU, I don't know. So basically you want to go through these wires, and so Aces here is pretty cool. They're going to give you a bunch of different wires you don't need, just to make everything so much more confusing. But there's going to be a certain wire in here that's going to have about a giant connector. That's going to be your motherboard connection. Now, I think. Huh. Yes, that's going to be your motherboard power supply connection. So it's important to reference the user manual that came with your motherboard. And it's clearly going to label your power supply. It's clearly going to label where the motherboard's power supply is going to go. So, where it's going to need power from. Oh. In this particular instance here, you'll see, you may or may not be able to see in here, that there's a giant connector back here. That is one of your power supplies. You're going to be hooking that up with this giant wire here. This giant wire connection right here. All right. You're going to be hooking that into that. And then running this, the rest of these two, down into the power supply. Your motherboard needs power first. If you hook up power to your motherboard, that's going to be powering your CPU cooler. It's going to be powering your fans, all your different fans. So, and your GPU has its own power supply. I'm going to start doing that. I'm not quite sure where to put you. So I need to make sure I don't mess this up. There we go. Now, the thing that's going to be kind of surprising is how much force you have to use with this stuff. You think that it's just going to pop in there real nice and easy, but it's probably not. And given how much space I actually have back there, I'm probably going to just run this thing right out through this rubber grommet. That is the closest to the motherboard. Let's find a connection for the GPU now. So that looks like a 16-pin connector. That's a 16-pin connector. So you have to go through your provided power cords because NVIDIA will not. NVIDIA. Let's see. Huh. There's more goodies. Yeah, so when you buy that card, they give you a giant little pinky ring here. I can't really fit it on my other fat finger. So got myself a nice little Republic of Gamers pinky ring here. Now I'm checking the NVIDIA case right now for I'm checking the NVIDIA box for the provided power supply. Here it is. Oh. Yeah. Just like